Hello, everyone. We're so happy to have you here with us on the Stronger Marriage webinar produced by the Utah Marriage Commission, hosted by Utah State University. I'm Alexis Alcott, the UMC Interim Program Coordinator, and we're excited to have you join us today as we celebrate 25 years of marriage celebrations in 2023. A huge part of that is these webinars that we do, and you guys for coming. So thank you all so much for taking the time out of your night to come and learn with us. In today's webinar, we're excited to be joined by Dr. Lauren Barnes. She grew up in Washington and Oregon, and during her graduate programs, Dr. Barnes worked at BYU Women's Services and Resource Center and the BYU Comprehensive Clinic, where she became specialized in treating women's issues such as body image, eating disorders, and postpartum depression. While working there, Dr. Barnes co-created a program aimed at improving body and self-image. During and after her PhD program, she worked as a therapist at Center for Change, a residential treatment center for women and girls struggling with eating disorders. Dr. Barnes is currently the director of clinical training for BYU's marriage and family therapy graduate programs. She also maintains a small private practice. She has researched and presented on family implicit rules in eating disordered and non-eating disordered families, as well as other family system dynamics related to economic distress, division of labor, parenting involvement, and marital relations. She's really happily married to her husband, Aaron Barnes, and they have two very lively young children. And she was also telling me dogs. In this webinar, Lauren will provide a brief overview of eating disorder diagnoses, body image issues, relational concerns, and suggested treatment. If you have any questions, please ask them by entering your questions to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. The chat will be turned off during the entirety of the presentation, so this is really the best place to contact Lauren and ask any questions. We'll have a 15-minute Q&A at the end of her presentation, so write down your questions and save them for the end. If you've joined us today for the CEU credit, make sure to stay on until the end of the presentation. The survey needed for your credit will automatically load onto the screen, and you'll receive an email from the Utah Marriage Commission with your certificate. You may also email the Utah Marriage Commission to receive your survey on this webinar if for some reason it doesn't load onto the screen. The email to do that is marriagecommission@usu.edu. Once the survey is completed, you will obtain an email with your CEU credit certification. We'll now turn the time over to Lauren for her presentation.
Okay, but Alexis, you have to tell me, is it showing you the presenter view on your end? Do you see all the numbers?
I still see the top of your screen.
You can see the top of my screen. Let's see. Redo.
You're good.
We're struggling here. And by me.
It is not an issue.
Okay, what about now? Nothing?
Oh, I'm not having your screen being shared at all right now.
Oh. All the...
There we go.
There we go. Eh?
That's perfect.
Does it have a big black square over it, or is it okay?
It's okay.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. Thanks so much, Lauren.
Okay, thank you. All right, thanks everybody for being here. This is a little weird because I can't even see who's even on, so hopefully you'll learn something. This is kind of a brief overview of what we'll go over in here. So let's get started with a little bit of a survey. So if you're watching this on a computer, pull out your phone and do that little QR code, or you can open another tab and go to slido.com. We can thank my graduate students for teaching me what this is. Literally just heard of it like 2 weeks ago. And then put in this little code or do the QR, whatever is easiest for you. I'm just kind of curious who's here. Okay. I'll watch the number go up here. And if there's only 2 people here, that's great too. So most of my presentation will be geared toward licensed or future licensed mental health providers. And hopefully some of it will help people who are either struggling with an eating disorder or know somebody who is. All right. Okay. 5 people's good. We got it. Okay, we're going to use this Slido thing like 2 other times, maybe 1 other time. That'll be good. Okay. Oh, look, it's my friends. Thanks, people. Okay, we got a little bit of everything here. Okay, so we've got some licensed clinicians. I assumed that would be quite a few people. And then, yeah, also people with a current or a history of an eating disorder, and somebody who loves somebody with a current or a history of eating disorder. We like to see this. Okay, so we'll go through kind of some of the maybe more boring, but I find this really interesting. History of eating disorders. So eating disorders have been around for a long, long time. And even if we think to like current religions and things like that, a lot of religions will give something up. Sometimes that's food, sometimes that's sleep, sometimes that's water. So that's been around for a long time as kind of a form of purification. And the term holy anorexia goes way back. We also know of people who would just gorge themselves and then purge and then return to eat more. So kind of odd relationships with food way back when. And we also know that appearance can be an indicator of status, whether that's financial status or where you fall in a community, but it was likely first diagnosed in the 1600s, so been around for a while. We have lots of terms to know here, and I'm going to go over them pretty quickly, assuming that you've probably heard most of these before. So restricting, exactly what it sounds like. Binging would be unusually large amounts of food and feeling unable to stop. So I've had clients come in and they'll say something like, I binged on cereal this morning. And I'm like, what did you eat for cereal? And they kind of describe it, and it's like a typical bowl size. That's not a binge. So we have some criteria that we look at. Purging can be any compensatory behavior, like laxatives, vomiting. We even look at over-exercising and things like that as a form of purging. Body image is a person's subjective view of themselves. So this, I'll say this multiple times, but body image is really our self-image. Sometimes people think, okay, if I just lose X number of pounds, or if I gain X number of muscle, or this and this and this, then I'll feel good. Body image is really in our brain. Food rules are just guidelines dictating how we eat. And then body mass index, we're going to talk about it, even though most people in the eating disorder community really hate the BMI. We hate that it's still around. We hate that people use it in the medical community, but we understand that it's been around for a very long time. So it's a person's weight divided by their height, right? So we know that people who weigh the same and are the same height can look a variety of ways. It just doesn't give a full picture of how people are depicted. If you want something fun to do, look up the history of BMI. It's kind of fascinating where it all comes from. Refeeding syndrome is really helpful to know about, especially when you're treating somebody who's maybe been quite deprived. Oh, it's asking me all the questions now too. It's hosts and panelists can't vote. I don't know what to do with this. Okay. So we have shifts in our body that will occur, electrolytes and other things. When you've been deprived of food for a long time, your body wants to keep you alive, and it will do whatever it takes to stay there. But if you introduce things too quickly, and if you don't introduce at the right ratio, it can actually lead to really scary things like arrhythmia, heart failure, coma, and sometimes even death. So when we're treating somebody with an eating disorder, we can't just say, okay, just eat and go back up to like normal counts of meals or normal intake, because that could actually be fatal to them. Anti-diet is a phrase that we're hearing a lot lately, just a movement centered on making peace with food, right? We don't believe that diets work. There's research like crazy out there. When I'm teaching a group, I'll usually say, what diets have you heard of? And probably anywhere from like 5 to 15 can be shouted out in any given room. Lots of diets have been around, and there's always going to be a new diet to try because they are not sustainable. Clean eating is a term that's used to describe pretty restrictive eating patterns. They want to eat foods that are close to their really natural state, so maybe unprocessed food, things like that you can grow at your house. This is often associated with something that's called orthorexia, which is not an official diagnosis, but alludes to the fact that people are so restrictive in the types of food they're eating that it has become detrimental. Disordered eating and subclinical eating concerns, they don't fall into the DSM-5, but still are quite problematic. I'm not personally a fan of when people are trying to figure out, well, is it disordered eating or an eating disorder? I'm like, none of this is healthy, so let's move past it and try to recover. Eating recovery, it's more than just, hey, I'm eating 3 meals again, or I'm eating a decent amount of food. This is a mental disorder, as we all know. So there's a lot of things that have to change within our minds, physically, emotionally, psychologically, all of that. Most of us have what is called a set point or kind of homeostasis for our bodies. This is a range where your body feels the best. This is when you're moving a good amount, when you're eating a good amount. This is just kind of where your body tends to be. And sometimes this changes throughout our life. Weight restoration is exactly what it sounds like. Orthorexia, I talked a little bit about that. Joyful movement. So researchers and clinicians were finding, as they were using the word exercise, that kind of had a different feel than just movement, and especially joyful movement. People should do exercise and movement that they enjoy, that brings them joy. Body neutrality. So this just means that you don't have to focus on how your body looks for it to have meaning. You don't look in the mirror and decide, well, I look great today, therefore I'm a good person. It's just like, okay, we have a body, that's great. Intuitive eating is a set of 10 principles. When you look up the hashtag intuitive eating on social media, you'll find everything from like cupcakes to donuts to rice to anything else. And just know that it's 10 principles and was originally created by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. And then health at every size is a movement looking more holistically at people rather than just using weight as the primary indicator. And there's a whole social justice piece there as well. Okay, statistics. So why do we care about eating disorders? Probably about 1 in 10 people will be impacted by an eating disorder. This is the same statistic in the US and also for the world. So 9% of the population. Athletes are 2 to 3 more times more likely to have an eating disorder. You can read over these. Suicidal ideation is up there. Eating disorders for the longest time had the highest mortality rate. Now it's second to opioids. So it's up there. We're losing a lot of people to this. And as you look through this, like this is affecting people who are quite young, quite vulnerable. And unfortunately, when somebody has an eating disorder, it can span a few decades. So the last one here, it's kind of a shout out to family-based treatment. In the research that we've seen, when teenagers struggling with an eating disorder get into family therapy, they are able to recover about 2/3 of them before even adulthood. So that's pretty exciting. There's a lot of hope here. Okay, talking about gender and eating disorders, men tend to be quieter, right? They don't, it's not as socially acceptable for men to gather together and start talking about the terrible things in their body, but it is pretty socially acceptable for women to do this. I feel like, I don't know what that movie Mean Girls, right? They all get together and the girl picks up on, oh, we're supposed to be picking apart our bodies now. Women tend to internalize feelings more, their thoughts, they body shame, surveillance. Body surveillance just means like if I walk by something that has a mirror on it, I tend to like look at myself, or I tend to notice the way that maybe my thighs are feeling on a chair or how much they spread, things like that. Women tend to do that more than men. So you can see here like men and women tend to react a little differently, but we are seeing quite an increase in males with eating disorders. I think when I started doing this, probably about 10, 15 years ago, it was on average like 1 in 10 people with an eating disorder was a male. And now we're seeing figures that are closer to 1 in 3 or 1 in 4. So pretty scary here and things to be aware of. Typically it has a later age of onset for men. And they're finding they're typically, here we have a shout out to the BMI, typically classified as overweight before the onset. So it will go undiagnosed for a longer period of time, which is really hard. It's probably full of a lot of shame for a man to speak up and say, hey, I need help with this. And they typically tend to have other addictions as well. There's a lot of comorbidity with these disorders, and a lot of presenting problems at the same time. You might be looking at this and thinking, Lauren, where are your citations? And I'm thinking the same thing as I read through this. So I just want to let you know at the end, there is a whole reference list that you can look at. I probably got a little too excited about making this pretty and then I ran out of time to put all the little numbers in. But I promise that there are references here. I didn't just make these up, although that would be kind of fun. So lots of people here, lots of men can struggle with an eating disorder. And sometimes it's a muscle dysmorphia or a reverse anorexia type thing, can never get big enough. They want to bulk up. It's never good enough. And what they see is not reality. Gender non-conforming individuals, a lot of the research here is saying that eating disorders are far more prominent in gender non-conforming people. So 4 to 8 times more likely to have an eating disorder than a cisgender person. So as I'm talking here, as one would guess, when you're around people that are more gender affirming or more positive toward you in general, the risk of an eating disorder decreases. We see that as well, like if you're around people who are supportive of you in general, risks for mental health problems decrease. And then I found one study that looked at a group of gender non-conforming people, and I thought this was kind of interesting. So you can see the stats here for some of these folks broken down. Okay. Self-check-in here. So these are questions I want you to think about for yourself, but also these are really helpful to use in the therapy room with our clients. How do you refer to your own body? What does the term body image mean to you? So how do you refer to your own body? So this, for example, this, let's see, descriptive terms, right? So we could say like, I'm thin, I'm fat, I'm mid-size, I'm plus size, I'm whatever. I'm attractive, I'm ugly. Like, what do you use to describe your body? What does the term body image mean to you? Is it something that can shift? Is it something, are we supposed to have positive? Are we supposed to have neutral? Where are you supposed to be with that? And then where are you with that? Because that will influence how you are with your clients. What's your current relationship with your own body? As we know, as therapists, we get to bring ourselves into the therapy room. I was talking recently with some first-year students that I'm training, and we were talking about how can you help a client get past or beyond where you are on your own work. So maybe think about that here. And I will say, like, regularly, I like say something in session, or my client says something in session, I'm like, oh shoot, I need to work on that. That's a real thing. We aren't ever going to have it all together. So it's okay for you to do this work, even if you're still working on it. And then what would you like your relationship with your body to be like in the future for you and for your clients? So these are great questions to ask clients. They're great questions for you to reflect on as well. Okay, if it's not about appearance, what does contribute to an eating disorder? I want you to think about this for a sec. And you get to go do this little Slido thing again. Let's see if this works. I've never done one like this. Sorry, you all have to listen to me drink. I probably should have muted it just then. You can write one word, you could write a sentence, you can write a few words. If you're driving, don't write any words. All right. Okay. Yep. It's all good stuff. Okay, so family having food rules, seeking control over some, society and your social group, societal expectations, shame about eating, genetics, fear of not being enough, trauma. Absolutely, all of these things. Okay. All right, I'm going to the next one. Y'all are very educated, so hopefully I can teach you something, and if not, you'll get your 1 CE and it will be awesome. Okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of time going all over this because you have access to the DSM-5 and you can study this on your own. But the major diagnoses that we tend to see are anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, and then other specified feeding or eating disorders. From earlier, I don't think I read this statistic out loud, but most people with an eating disorder, I hope I say this correctly, many tend to be in other specified feeding or eating disorder because they don't fit neatly into the criteria for another one. So if you've been practicing for a while, you've been through a few of the DSM iterations and you notice that some changes happened this last, well, I guess 2 iterations ago when they came out with the DSM-5. So one of them was the classification of the severity of an eating disorder, which is based on BMI, which you can think, and you've probably seen some problems that that's caused. I think they also, I believe they got rid of the requirement to lose your period as one of the indicators, and loss of sex drive. With bulimia, you've got purging and non-purging type. So there's all sorts of behaviors here and things that you need to be aware of, but also know that a lot of these people who present with an eating disorder may be in what the BMI would classify as a typical healthy BMI, and sometimes even above that. So kind of have that in mind and think, okay, if somebody is restricting, how's that going to impact a couple, or how's that going to impact a family, or how is that going to impact even that individual? So there's lots of things here. The research varies quite a bit, but I think what I tended to see was anywhere from like 50 to 95% of clients who have an eating disorder have comorbidities, right? So really common ones are depression, anxiety, OCD. I think I've seen more OCD lately, probably in the last 5 years than before that, but anxiety, depression, absolutely. Those are going to come up, and sometimes personality disorders with clients with eating disorders. And just know that it's probably going to be more chronic if that is one of the diagnoses that a person has. So lots of things that you're treating here. Okay, good guessing earlier. So psychological correlates to eating disorders, lack of control. So you never know here what comes first. Was it the anxiety, the depression, the OCD, the eating disorder? Sometimes they sneak up at the same time. Perfectionism, low self-esteem, feeling inadequate, impulsive behavior, inflexibility. Lots of things here. I went to a presentation recently and she asked, what's the biggest risk factor for developing an eating disorder? The strongest correlation. And we were throwing out all sorts of guesses. And then she said, it's being female. I was like, oh, okay. There's a lot of things here. So difficulty expressing emotion, feelings, family member with an eating disorder. If you have that, that's a really strongly related to developing an eating disorder, especially if you're a child and you had a parent with an eating disorder. Diet culture here. Living in a society that has pretty narrow definitions of what's beautiful, trauma, especially sexual abuse, neglect, being teased, what the cultural norms are in that area. Okay, and here again, these are some questions that I ask my clients, but I do think are beneficial for each of us to reflect on as well. So when do you remember first being aware of your body? What implicit and explicit messages did you receive? So that could be like the glance that you get when you go to visit your grandparents or your aunts and uncle twice a year or whatever happens there. It could be things that are said out loud. What messages were said about the opposite sex? I think we talk about this without even realizing that we're doing that. How do you feel about your body? What do you like? What would you change if you could? What do you know about the wellness and beauty industry, and is this related at all? So figure out how that's feeding into this. Okay, just really briefly, I want to go over a couple of the body image movements that we're seeing here. So we have the fat liberation movement. This has picked up a lot in recent years. We have body positivity, focusing on loving your body, loving all body types, and then body neutrality. So appreciate your body can do, and maybe not always having to look at it as something that you love in its appearance. And I will say there are many critiques for all things in research and academia. There are all sorts of critiques here, right? One that comes to mind is, well, what if my body can't do much anymore? What about ability? What about disability? So I know that we have to think through some other ways here, and maybe there will be other terms to help us out. Okay, I also wanted to really briefly touch on body dysmorphic disorder. So most people who are diagnosed with an eating disorder tend to have some kind of body dysmorphia. They're not seeing their body as it really is. And you can look through the symptoms here. There are a lot. But one of the hard things here, they tend to act really extreme ways to try and correct whatever the perceived flaw is. So I listed some treatment things here that have been shown by research to be pretty helpful. So help the client to understand, respond appropriately to patterns, internal signals, right? Get them in touch with their body. A lot of people with eating disorders can't even tell when they're hungry or full or cold or paying attention, tired. They're just tired all the time. Get them exercising regularly. What kind of joyful movement? Help clients build their interoceptive awareness, and we'll talk more about that in just a bit. Oh, good. I can take a water break here. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we can watch this. There's all sorts of campaigns out there. This is kind of an interesting one to me, given everything that we're seeing in advances in technology. So, Alexis, tell me if this doesn't work out.
Make yourself comfortable. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, how do I want to sit? This.
Water there. You need a drink.
I don't want to ruin the lipstick.
Oh, yeah.
Social media can be good, but it can be bad as well. In terms of her building her confidence, it can build her confidence.
Marjorie's just
Oh, yeah.
Social media can be good, but it can be bad as well. In terms of her building her confidence, it can build her confidence.
Marjorie's just trying to find herself now, you know. She's not influenced by social media yet.
Most of the influencers that I've seen have definitely had a positive impact on me.
Hey guys, here's a beauty hack I'm obsessed with. I am so happy. Look at how cinched my waist is.
Look at how flat my stomach is.
It's the shortcut to flawless skin.
You know that Botox doesn't just reduce wrinkles, right? Baby Botox is amazing. You're never too young to start.
That is not me.
There are these great powders. They stop you feeling hungry so you can always skip breakfast and lunch.
And you have to treat yourself to a chemical peel. They're a total glow up. They burn away the top layers of your skin and let new skin grow through.
Hey, Amojo. If your teeth are uneven, you can always file them down with a nail file. It's literally so simple.
File your teeth.
Don't put up with your thin lips, sweetie. Lip filler kits let you inject yourself at home. They're my total go-to.
Fake eyelashes are so easy to glue on if you cut your eyelashes off.
There's some really great pills you can use.
Keep telling yourself you're not hungry, you're just thirsty.
Never look bloated again.
Book it into your skin.
Sexiest lashes.
Botox.
Remember, skinny is never finished.
Oh.
It's
Have you actually seen stuff like that?
yeah, a lot. This stuff is on every girl's feed. They're watching, right? I mean, at night when I can't see them.
It's scary to me that my kids are watching this and they think that's how they have to look.
I saw one of the teeth filing videos. I remember that one. I remember seeing that all over. I know this stuff. I can't prevent them from seeing these, but I can talk to them about it.
100% always be talking. And have Peyton know that she can always ask me anything.
My mom has taught me not to listen to people like that and to be proud of who I am.
Okay, we don't need to watch the whole advertising part here. So there's a few ways this can be taken. One is social media, and I do think that there's a lot that can be talked about there. We as individuals need to choose what's on our social media feed and how it's making us, and notice how are we feeling after that, and then probably curate a feed that is helpful to us. But one of the other things that was crazy to me about this video, I'm like, they just took their moms and made them say these things that their moms would probably never say. So media is getting more and more tricky to be able to decipher and figure out what's going on. When I was growing up, it was still very much magazines, right? And I'd see them at the checkout line in the grocery store, which you can still do. But the fact that they're scrolling and there's billboards galore, lots of things around. So become media literate, teach your clients to do the same thing. This helps with body image, and also be aware of what context is surrounding our clients and what's surrounding us. Okay, into more therapy talk for those of you that are therapists here. Hopefully that was a little helpful. Okay, I tend to work from a pretty attachment-based framework. I think about a lot of things in terms of attachment. So attachment is the outward expression of psychological, emotional issues, right? So this is how an eating disorder often will come up. Our attachment is a way to describe the relationships we have with people. The goal is to have a secure attachment. The assumption here is that an eating disorder is unhealthy and often related to an insecure attachment. So there have been some studies that looked at attachment and eating disorders, and the three insecure types: avoidant, anxious, and disorganized or ambivalent. This also, I'll say, it depends on the researcher and who's writing the paper, what they decide to call these three types. But think about people you know with eating disorders where they've been able to avoid or be more anxious or kind of have a more ambivalent and disorganized relationship. And then they're using food or lack thereof to kind of ease this stress. Okay, so why would you treat an eating disorder with a couple? So you have a couple coming in. For most of these, I'm going to talk about the more prevalent form, which is typically, or at least prevalent form in research, is a heterosexual couple with the wife presenting with anorexia. That's what there's more research on. There is some out there about bulimia, things like that as well. So why wouldn't you just work with an individual? Because that seems a heck of a lot easier, right? You just have the person come in, you work on their eating disorder, and you send them on their way. As a marriage and family therapist, I would say, yeah, it's probably easier in the short term, but what's going to come up later? So we really believe in systems. Anything we do as an individual impacts the people around us. My mood as a mom impacts my kids all the time, and probably even the dogs, right? Like, things I do impact the people around me. So you can treat somebody individually with an eating disorder, but what happens if you don't take into account the system they're going back to? And if somebody is in a partnership, they're married or in a relationship, and they have somebody that is supposed to be their primary support or primary secure attachment, that is a great place to start and build a relationship that will help somebody through recovery. A lot of the research looks back on people that have recovered, and one of the things that they usually say is the most helpful is having somebody who was close to them support them through recovery. Okay, so partners of an individual with an eating disorder, they often struggle. They're like trying to figure out, I don't understand this eating disorder fully. I don't understand how it started. I don't understand what this person gets from it. I just wish it would go away. They feel excluded. They may report that their partner is engaging in a lot of secrecy, pretty distant. They may feel pretty powerless. They're like, I want to help my partner, but I don't even know how. And then after time and time of trying to help them, then they start to avoid, right? We see that over time. Well, it's not going to do any good, so I'll just give up. And then they tend to report a lot of what's deemed in the literature as caregiver distress and burnout. So when you're really caring for somebody and then they're not getting better and they don't seem to want to get better, you're like, what the heck do I do? Or maybe they want to get better, but you're trying to do it all, just the two of you. You're dang tired. I put a note here. So those of you that have maybe worked with teenagers, you've probably heard of the Maudsley approach. This is a family-based treatment for an adolescent where the parents tend to take a lot of control. Not helpful for a partnership. We do not want their spouse to become the person that's holding them accountable. We need them to stay in an equal partnership. So don't even try it, or maybe try it and see how it goes, and then try something else. Okay, individuals with an eating disorder, they tend to report significant relationship distress. So the research showed that, and if you hear my dog sneezing in the background, sorry. The research shows that people with an eating disorder are just as likely to end up in a relationship as somebody without. And then they want that relationship to be successful, so they're stressed out, they can't interact positively, they're communicating negatively all the time. They tend to report a lot of sexual dysfunctioning. If you want more information about that, I think there's a recorded webinar with Jessica Gilliland talks about this. Look it up, it'll be good. They are reporting that they want to recover. If they're in a partnership and they want that relationship to work, they're pretty highly motivated for recovery. And the research looking back at couples, at partnerships, they show that people are in a partnership and the person with an eating disorder has typically had a longer duration of symptoms. So they've probably been struggling with an eating disorder for like 20 years compared to individuals who aren't partnered who are struggling with an eating disorder. So that was kind of interesting to see in that. But their motivation for recovery was higher than somebody who was not partnered. Okay. All right. Use a treatment team. would make you probably a little crazy to try to do this all on your own. So working at a residential treatment center was so helpful for me because we had regular treatment team meetings, and I was able to see the benefit of every person's perspective and their training. So I know that I'm not a dietitian. I haven't gone to school for that. Do I know a couple things? Yeah, but is that where my specialty is? No. So I'm usually going to collaborate with a dietitian, and I'm going to make sure their intuitive eating or health at every size aligned. And then I'm going to act as the primary therapist. And it is my opinion that if you're the primary therapist, you should also be the relational therapist. And I know that varies so widely between mental health providers. Some people will say, well, I need to be their individual therapist, and then they have another relational therapist. Whatever you want. And then work and collaborate with a medical doctor. So I would say a family doctor is usually fine as a prescriber if it's just eating disorder and depression, or eating disorder and anxiety. But if you get to more diagnoses than that, then you probably want a psychiatrist. Okay, here is my rough treatment plan outline. So this is typically what I would do. Unite the couple against the eating disorder, psychoeducation, disclosure and impact statements. I heard this terminology from a friend and I am totally taking it. I usually just would call this, and then you're all going to say how the eating disorder has impacted me or us. So this could be helpful to have from the individual who is presenting with an eating disorder. And this is helpful from a partner. It's also helpful to get from kids or in-laws, other people, if it's relevant. They're going to learn and practice skills and behaviors that impact daily functioning. We're going to build support in the system where they can rely on each other, and we're going to increase attachment in the couple system. We're doing a bunch of different things. Okay. And you're thinking, how the heck do we do that? So, okay, I don't know how, but I want you to order these. I think you drag it to rank order. Which thing comes first? What would you do as a clinician? It says one person did it. We'll see. Okay. All right. It looks like everybody agreed pretty much, right? Medical stability, okay, comes first, and body image is the last one there. So really what I want to say to you here is, however you approach this, you need to make sure that you believe it. We know that the research shows that the relationship between a therapist and their client is a high predictor of change, but we also know that the research says that you better do whatever model you actually believe in. So even though I'm going to tell you some things of maybe what I would do, you need to do what you believe. Clients pick up on that somehow, and their success depends on it. Okay, medical stability. Are you weighing the client? Usually, no. You absolutely can, but you're probably not taking labs and doing all of those things. This is why you need to collaborate with other people. So refer the client to somebody who is good with eating disorders. I see clients in the area, so I try to go to doctors in the area to see who's going to be a good fit. And I have conversations with them. And I recognize that's a privilege, right? I have good health insurance and I can do that. but it's good to get a feel for what a typical appointment with these providers is going to look like. Collaborate closely with a dietitian. They're going to be working on food and meal planning and medical stability. And we're going to talk about, we're going to do a lot of like cognitive behavioral therapy work here, right? The number on the scale doesn't dictate your worth. All sorts of things here. Indicators of more medical stability, regulate body temperature, aware of what's going on in their body. They can track a conversation, less forgetful, heart rate, blood pressure, lab work. They should have all of those things done. Okay, psychoeducation. We're going to talk about intuitive eating is one thing we could talk about in psychoeducation. This is hard to do. So before somebody's medically stable, you just need to recognize that their brain is not totally functioning and on board yet because their body was just trying to stay alive. So psychoeducation may need to be repeated all throughout treatment and all throughout recovery. There are over 100 studies now. I don't know how many, but you can look them up about how beneficial intuitive eating can be. And intuitive eating, again, is not just like cupcakes and donuts and chocolate whenever we want. It includes 10 principles that we need to live by, one of which is like joyful movement, which is pretty awesome. So there are some awesome indicators here that you need to get the couple on board with, not just one person, because it helps if you're going to be eating at home that everybody is under the same expectations. Here you go. You can see the 10 principles there. So this is going to require people to really attune to what's going on in their body. Most of us know that when we need to go to the bathroom, that's something we're pretty good at after we're potty trained. But even like the awareness of, am I hungry? Am I full? And that may take a while for people to learn. And to have your partner go through this with you and practice this and to be able to talk about it with them can be really, really helpful. Okay, maybe you're going to assign them some reading, some podcasts. You're going to set up some homework for them to do as a couple. It could be tempting to say, I don't want to talk about your eating disorder or this eating disorder at all with you ever because it's just too stressful. But we know that couples who go through hard things usually are more attached to each other and are able to better support each other through hard times. So it could be helpful to set specific times for them to talk about eating disorder recovery. And I think it's really important for the individual with an eating disorder to assign a role or a job to the people around them. They're like primary support. So what are some ways that your partner can show up in a way that's really helpful for you? Okay, interoceptive awareness. I think I've said this a couple times. This is just the sense awareness of the internal state of our bodies, right? I know when I'm cold, I want to go get a coat, right? Things like that. I know when I need to get up and use the bathroom. I know when I have an itch, things like that. So help them. You can do this in so many different ways. You can teach about it, but you can also practice it in your office and have them practice mindfulness and things like that at home. So there's all sorts of things here that you can do because we want to get people back to the place where they're in tune with their body and what they need. Okay, implicit family rules. You will not see this published anywhere. This is one of those studies that I have on my computer and hopefully we'll maybe do someday. And I'm just realizing the time, Alexis. Okay. So talking about the unspoken rules in our family can be really helpful. Talk about it in therapy. And we're going to talk about the process of how we go about making these rules and obeying these rules and what needs to be changed. And it's really helpful to do that when you have a therapist helping with the conversation. Okay, building skills that impact daily living. So mindfulness, right? We're going to work on practicing some of our fear foods. We're going to increase our ability to handle distress. We're going to talk So if you do IFS, you're going to do all sorts of those things here. I will say EMDR and ART are more helpful later in therapy. Probably don't want to try that right off the bat when somebody is still a little medically unstable. Okay, building connection in a couple, really important, right? They're here together. And yeah, you could have the conversation one person in the office, but it's really helpful to have the conversation together, because I guarantee their partner can say and notice a lot of things that are happening. So within this, you're going to be increasing opportunities, encouraging connection, have some space for grief work. Again, you're going to have to talk about sexual functioning. That is a big complaint of a lot of these individuals. And then body image conversations. Body image is usually the last thing to get better. Okay, how do you measure success? So with a couple, you're going to set up, we do this with all of our clients, right? Like, how will you know when you're done with therapy? Well, we're going to look at one thing's medical stability. We're going to look at your ability to be connected with your partner. We're going to look at your attachment here. We're going to look at decreased eating disorder behaviors, emotional presence, things like that. Okay, I put a plug in here. I hope this is okay. But a few colleagues of mine created this free assessment portal, and it has an eating disorder measure in it and some attachment measures and things like that. Okay, here are some lovely questions for you to ask yourself as a therapist to continue doing your own work. So keep working on yourself even while you're working with this clientele. It is worth it. Okay, and I have links to all of these questionnaires and worksheets that I'll give you on a QR code here at the end. But these are some cool in-session tools. So whenever I give an assessment, I try to make it part of treatment. We're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about it from both perspectives here as a couple. Or else, what is the point of giving it? Okay, list of readings. You can look back at this later. Definitely want to read some of these things. Content creators. Okay, I know we need some time for questions here. Okay, here are just upcoming events. Alexis, you can you can come back.
Right back.
Okay.
Yeah, you should definitely go to those. Those sound really cool. Thank you so much for sharing, Lauren. Go ahead and put any of your questions in that Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen once again. But we do have a couple of questions already. So I'm going to go ahead and read those off. The first one is, you mentioned that some of the terminology at the beginning can be damaging to recovery for people with body image issues. Which ones should I not use?
Okay, there were a lot of terms there. So, okay, this is a loaded question. I would say in general, it's not helpful to talk about people's appearances, which I know is really hard to do in this culture. Some people like the word fat, some people hate the word fat. It's like one of those words people are trying to reclaim. BMI, some of us hate it, but we know it's there, right? So do your best. I tell my students, I'm teaching like a gender and ethnicity class, and I'm like, we misstep all the time, but it's better to say something and then ask to be corrected than to just not say anything at all. And if you're in a relationship with a partner that has an eating disorder, they will tell you. And if they don't, you should ask them.
I love that. Thank you. Kind of around that partner relationship with eating disorders. Someone asks, what do you recommend, or when do you recommend to eat at home as a couple to help a partner recovering from it?
Okay, when do I recommend eating at home as a couple?
Yeah, it says what or when. So I'm assuming what kind of foods or when should they eat?
Foods. Okay, so I would say throughout recovery. Most research says at least one meal a day together, right? So this is tricky, but I'm assuming they're like partners that are adults and they're going to be honest and they want recovery. So some of it, maybe you can't be there for 2 meals a day. That's fine. And you're going to assume that your partner's telling you the truth. If they need you or they want you there for more, great. And I would say start with foods that sound appealing. Like whatever the favorite meals are, do that. It's trickier to start with fear foods. I usually say like build up to that because you want to like get back to enjoying the process.
Thank you. Oh, we have another person ask, what is fear foods? Or what are fear?
Yeah, so fear foods differ person to person. And I usually just ask my clients, like, what are some foods that are scarier to eat? So that is kind of a weird term that we use. Some people, it's like, well, cheesecake is really scary. I had one person who was like, oh my gosh, if you gave me this type of chocolate, I would binge the whole thing. So that, to me, maybe she's not afraid of it, but she's like, I don't think I could control myself around it. That's one of those. Yeah.
Our next question is, are you familiar with EFFT and using that with couples? Any thoughts on using it with couples?
Okay, so this is terrible that I don't know what the other E stands for, or emotional family, EFFT. Yes.
EFFT.
Okay, I was like EFT. Okay. Yes. So I think that could be really helpful to use. Yeah, and that comes from an attachment-based lens as well, right? And builds upon that. I think there are some places there, right, where you're going to slow down and take more time in a few of those steps.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, my pronunciation wasn't good enough on the F.
Oh, I was just like, wait, what is that?
The next question is, what addictions couple with male eating disorders mainly?
Ooh, okay, so it's mostly substance use. And we actually see that a lot with females as well, right? Because sometimes you start a substance and you notice that it decreases your hunger, or maybe it increases your hunger, or maybe it numbs you out to feeling, right? So we see a lot of substance use.
Our next question is, how do I, as a parent, check for signs of eating disorders in my children?
It depends on the age of the children, right? So having had like really young children where you're like monitoring everything that you're giving them and how they're doing to like teenagers or kind of do their own thing and beyond. I'm like, just pay attention, right? How often do you have family meals? What kinds of foods are they eating? What kinds are they afraid of? How do they talk about their bodies? How do their friends talk about bodies and food when they're around? Friends are a pretty helpful indicator or assessment tool as a parent. And I think it's best to just talk about these things. When we don't talk about it, it makes it way more shameful and way more scary. So just talking about this is something that's around us. And you can go about it in a number of ways. There's so many opportunities.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Lauren. Those are all the questions that we have tonight. Thank you so much for your answers and everyone else for coming. I wanted to give Lauren a quick ability to go back to that last slide if she would like, so that people can reach out to her and see the resources and everything that she shared, see those citations that she didn't add throughout her presentation. I just want to give you all the opportunity to see that at the end.
Yeah, you can scan that QR code.
Perfect. Yeah. And also, I just wanted to, once again, as we're kind of closing out, remind you that if you are here for a CEU credit, please make sure to stay on until the end of the webinar for your survey that will automatically load. If for some reason it doesn't automatically load, please just email us at marriagecommission@usu.edu, and we'll make sure that we get that certification for you. When you complete that, we'll send back your certification email. Thank you so much, Lauren, and thanks everyone else for joining. We're so grateful for your questions and your participation and your preparation, Lauren. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.